today's video, we're going to be covering how to advocate for your child when they're struggling with their behavior in school. Now, this can kind of be a loaded topic, but it has been the main focus of my career and something that I am incredibly passionate about. In this video, we're going to be discussing exactly what is going on in schools, what's happening in schools related to student behavior, and how you as a parent can get your child support for their behavior in school. Plus, I have a few different resources that I would love to share with you to support you and to support your child's educational team with ensuring that your child's needs are met. Lately, there has been a lot of talk about behavior in schools, and if you're a parent struggling to get your child support for their behavior, you are in the right place. Are you ready? Let's go. Before I get into all of the awesome stuff I want to share with you today, I really want to take a moment to get clear on what we're talking about when we say behavior. The dictionary definition states that behavior is the way in which one acts or conducts oneself, especially towards others. And the additional definition states the way in which an animal or person acts in response to a particular situation or stimulus. So we can pretty safely say that behavior is the way that someone acts or the way that they behave. And I really want you to take note here. Behavior isn't inherently negative. It is, however, something that's observable by others and something that every living thing participates in. As humans, our behaviors they're pretty important. It's how we communicate. It's the outward expression of our internal worlds. And like I said, most importantly, really, how we communicate with others. Even babies who lack basic language and communication skills are still able to communicate their wants and needs using or through their behavior. If you've ever participated in a strike or maybe you volunteered to help others, you're communicating with others through your actions or your behavior. And when we understand that behavior is simply a form of communication, we can seek to understand the language and the needs of the specific that specific behavior is communicating. But how do we do that? There are many different ways to interpret behavior, and unless you understand the language of behavior, you'll most likely be interpreting it through a lens that includes all of your prior experiences. For example, you might notice a car that's driving erratically on the road. One person watching this might read this behavior as extreme road rage and feel, anger or something like that towards the person driving that vehicle. Another person might see this car driving erratically and start worrying or sending well wishes, interpreting this as an emergency situation, or maybe something has happened to the driver. This distinction here is really, really important when we're discussing behavior in the classroom, because an educator's prior experiences will play a part in how they interpret their students' behavior. Here's an example from the classroom. Let's say a student is screaming and covering their ears. One educator might interpret this as disrespect and discipline the student, where another educator who is informed and knowledgeable about things like sensory needs might see this as an unmet need related to sensory overwhelm. From here, you can probably start to see why so many educators are raising concerns about behavior in school. Of course, there are many, many different factors that play into a child's behavior and can contribute to the reasons why a child might behave a certain way. But when educators are provided with adequate professional development related to classroom management, child development, and crisis prevention, they can be better equipped to support their students' needs. Based on some of the things that are circulating online, you might be wondering, is there an overwhelming number of behaviors in schools now compared to previous years in the past? Well, yes and no. This question is kind of hard to answer because there are so many different things to consider, including issues with other systems that are impacting children and families, issues with income and the economy, and there are issues with food and nutrition, and issues with healthcare, and there's so many things that are contributing to a child's experience and just their childhood in general, their education, that we can't pinpoint it to one thing and say that behavior has increased over the past so many years. Another thing that is important to consider when we're thinking about this question is The availability of information in previous years. We didn't have social media 10 years ago like we do today. Of course, I think maybe a few platforms existed, but nothing close to the access and availability we have today. We basically have the world at our fingertips. And with that ability to share information almost instantaneously, we're able to hear a lot more about what's going on in classrooms than we did in the past. And we're able to hear a lot more in real time compared to how information was delivered and then received prior to now. This doesn't even include factors like growing class sizes, reduced budgets, and lack of funding for schools, teacher shortages, and so many more factors. So, like I said, it really is hard to measure exactly what students were doing in the classroom 10 years ago, but research has measured educators' feelings towards behavior in schools and related to behavior in schools. And the majority of teachers report feeling inadequately prepared to face the realities of today's classrooms. And they also report a lack of professional development when it comes to behavior and classroom management. But what does that mean for you and your child? How can you support your child when there are these huge systemic issues that we're facing? Well, the good news is that there is a bright side, and the bright side really is why I'm here right now with you, sharing this information to begin with. You can get your child support for their behavior in school. And when you advocate for your child, you advocate for every child, and you support educators along the way. So let's talk action steps. What can you do if your child is struggling with behavior in school? How can you support them? How can you advocate for them to get their needs met and identify what their behavior is communicating? So earlier we covered what behavior actually is and how when we learn to read the language of behavior, we can better meet a student's need. So in order to meet their need, we first have to determine what exactly the behavior is trying to communicate. What is the need? From there, we can provide supports and direct instruction in areas like self-regulation, coping skills, and communication to help meet the student's need, and also to help them communicate their needs in a more appropriate way. Educators can use something called a functional behavior assessment and analysis, or FBA, to identify the function of your child's behavior. Essentially, they're identifying what that behavior is trying to communicate. From the data collected during the FBA, educators are able to identify patterns in that behavior. Things like triggers, or things like if a student is regularly struggling to attend to their work on Tuesday afternoons, or something like very specific patterns can be identified. Patterns with behavior can be identified through the FBA. Like I said, they can also identify triggers, and FBAs are incredibly helpful with identifying effective strategies to use whenever harmful behaviors arise. So whenever we're collecting this data, that is the functional behavior assessment and analysis. So we collect the data and then we analyze it to see what information we can pull. This information is then used in something called a behavior intervention plan, or a BIP. All of that information from the FBA is taken to draft that intervention plan, which is different from a crisis plan. A crisis plan is more of procedures and protocols when crises arise, versus a behavior intervention plan, which is the plan moving forward day to day, week to week, how we're going to support the student with their behavior. The behavior intervention plan outlines exactly how your child's educational team will support your child through direct instruction, accommodations, or supports. Usually, it is not required for a child to be receiving special education services or have an IEP in place for an FBA to be conducted. And sometimes that data can even be used to determine eligibility for special education services. However, if your child is already receiving special education services or already has an IEP, the team can still conduct an FBA and include the behavior intervention plan with your child's IEP. Because the FBA is an assessment or an evaluation that is outside of your standard classroom procedures, the educational team should receive your consent or parental consent prior to beginning the assessment. Now, if your child is struggling with behavior in school, I would highly recommend requesting a functional behavior assessment or an FBA. because without a clear understanding of your child's need, it really is almost impossible to intervene and to implement effective strategies that will actually support them. And this applies to every area of education in the classroom, not just behavior. If your child is struggling with behavior in school, I am here to tell you that you aren't alone and you don't have to do this alone. I am here to support you, and I will be sharing even more resources with you soon. For now, though, if you want to learn more about the FBA process, behavior intervention plans, and just really truly understand your child's data and how you can use that to advocate for them, you can check out my free training, Understanding the FBA. In this free 5-part training, I walk you step by step through everything you need to know when it comes to supporting your child with their behavior in school. Plus, you even gain access to a few other resources like a daily behavior sheet template and a communication log that you can share with your child's educational team or use yourself to support your advocacy efforts. And if you'd like more one-on-one support, I do offer free consultations, parent coaching, traditional advocacy services, and more. All of the links for everything that I've covered are listed in the description below. And one more thing. If you have any questions that you'd like me to cover in an upcoming video, please send me an email at ria@myeducationworks.org. Don't worry, I will make sure that's listed below as well. Send me an email there because I am hoping to do a Q&A video soon. So send any questions that you have and make sure that you're subscribed so you know when your question is answered, so you get a notification whenever that video posts. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I am so glad that you were here. I'm so glad that we got to spend this time together, and I cannot wait to talk to you soon. Bye, friends.